The ox cart hits a rut in the road. It is a small thing, a wheel dropping into a groove worn by 1,000 carts before it. The kind of thing that happens 100 times on any journey and nobody remembers it by evening. But a man named Uzzah is walking beside the cart, and when the cart lurches, his hand moves before his mind does. He reaches out. His fingers close around the wooden side of the box riding on the cart. And Uzzah, a man who has spent his entire life in the shadow of this object, a man who grew up in his father Abinadab's house, where the ark had rested for 20 years, a man who knew its history better than almost anyone alive, drops dead on the threshing floor of Nacon. He was trying to help. God killed him anyway. If that sentence makes you uncomfortable, good. It should, because before this is over, you are going to watch 70 more people die for looking at the wrong thing. You are going to watch a temple idol fall on its own face twice in one night. You are going to watch 2 corrupt priests carried off a battlefield in body bags on the same afternoon. And you are going to meet one man, just one, who touches what everyone else fears and walks away not only alive, but more blessed than he has ever been in his life. We will get to him, but not yet. First, you need to understand what was actually on that cart. Most people imagine a box, a golden chest with angels on the lid, like something from a museum catalogue or an adventure film. And yes, that is what it looked like from the outside. But that description misses everything that matters. The Ark of the Covenant was not a container. It was not a relic or a trophy or a religious artifact. It was a throne. The Hebrew word is kabod, glory, but the word carries weight far beyond what English can hold. Kabod means heaviness, density, the sheer gravitational press of something that cannot be reduced or explained. When the biblical writers say the glory of God filled a place, they are not describing a warm feeling or a spiritual atmosphere. They are describing a presence so concentrated that the physical world bends around it. The ark was where that presence sat. God told Moses exactly what to build: acacia wood, overlaid inside and out with pure gold. 2 golden cherubim mounted on the lid, their wings stretched toward each other, their faces turned downward. And in the space between those wings, what the Hebrew calls the Kappareth, the mercy seat, God said something that should stop you cold. He said, "There I will meet with you, there I will speak with you." Not a symbol of where God might be, not a representation of divine proximity, the actual location, the earthly coordinate of the throne of the creator of the universe. Now you understand why touching it without authorization was not a religious technicality. It was the equivalent of reaching out your hand and grabbing the live rail of the highest voltage line in existence, not because God was cruel, because God was real. And the rules he gave Moses about how the ark was to be handled were not arbitrary restrictions. They were the operating instructions for the most dangerous object on earth. The instructions were specific to the point of severity. The ark was to be carried by a specific family within the tribe of Levi, the Kohathites. Their job, and only their job, was to transport the ark when Israel moved camp. But here is what God told them about how to do it. They were to insert 2 long poles through golden rings on the sides of the ark and lift it that way. The poles were never to be removed. The Kohathites would carry the ark on their shoulders, the poles resting across their bodies, their hands never touching the gold. And there was one more rule, one that sounds almost impossible. They could not look at it. Not at the ark directly, not at the mercy seat, not inside the chest. Numbers chapter 4 makes this plain. If the Kohathites looked at the holy things even for a moment while they were being packed up, they would die. The priests, Aaron's sons, had to cover the ark with a veil, then with badger skins, then with a blue cloth over all of that, before the Kohathites were even allowed to enter the room. Pay attention to this. The men whose entire life purpose was to carry the ark were not permitted to see what they were carrying. That is not bureaucratic overcaution. That is the distance between the holy and the human, and for 400 years, roughly, the system held. The Kohathites carried, the priests covered. The ark moved through the wilderness, into Canaan from camp to camp, and the presence of God traveled with his people in a way that no other nation on earth could claim. Then came Hophni and Phinehas. These were the sons of Eli, the high priest. They served at the tabernacle in Shiloh, and the Bible does not soften its assessment of them. 1 Samuel says they were worthless men who did not know the Lord. They took meat from the sacrifices by force. They slept with the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Their father knew and did not stop them. And God told Eli plainly, "The priesthood is going to be taken from your family. Both your sons will die on the same day, and that day is coming." The day came faster than anyone expected. Israel went to war against the Philistines. They lost the first battle, 4,000 men dead on the field. And the elders of Israel sat in the wreckage of that defeat and asked a question that reveals exactly how badly they had misunderstood everything. Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies. They thought the ark was a weapon, a divine asset they could deploy, a lucky charm covered in gold. Hophni and Phinehas carried it out of Shiloh and into the camp. When the ark arrived, the Israelites shouted so loudly the ground shook. The Philistines heard it across the battlefield and were afraid briefly. Then one of their commanders said something remarkable. He said, "Be strong, Philistines. Act like men, or you will serve the Hebrews the way they have served you." The Philistines fought. Israel ran. 30,000 soldiers died. The ark of God was captured. And Hophni and Phinehas, the priests who carried it into battle as though it were a weapon they could aim, died on the same afternoon, exactly as God had said. The ark of God was in the hands of the Philistines, and what happened next was something nobody in Israel or Philistia was prepared for. The Philistines brought the ark to Ashdod. They carried it into the temple of their god Dagon, a figure half man, half fish, the deity of grain and sea, the most powerful god in the Philistine pantheon. They set the ark down before the statue of Dagon like a trophy, like proof that their god had beaten Israel's god in open combat. The next morning, the priests of Dagon walked into the temple and found their god on his face on the floor, face down before the ark. They picked him up, set him back on his pedestal, and said nothing publicly about what they had seen. The following morning they walked in again. Dagon was on the floor again, but this time his head and both his hands had broken off and were lying on the threshold. Just the stump of Dagon remained. Here is what most people miss about this scene. The Philistines did not conclude that Dagon had fallen accidentally. They did not write it off as seismic activity or structural failure. 1 Samuel records that from that day forward, the priests of Dagon would not step on the threshold of that temple. They stepped over it for generations, as though the floor where their god's hands fell was marked. As though something had happened there that they could not explain and would not forget. But the broken idol was the least of their problems. Tumors broke out across Ashdod. The Hebrew word the text uses, ophalim, describes growths, swellings, afflictions that spread through the population rapidly and without mercy. The men of Ashdod said, "The ark of the God of Israel must not stay with us, because his hand is hard against us and against Dagon our God." So they sent the ark to Gath, and the tumors followed it to Gath. Then they sent it to Ekron, and the people of Ekron cried out, "They have brought the ark of the God of Israel to us, to kill us and our people." 7 months. The ark moved from city to city through Philistia for 7 months, and every city it entered was hit with plague. The Philistine lords finally called their priests and asked, "What do we do with this thing?" And their own pagan priests gave them advice that reads almost like theology. "Send it back," they said, "and send a guilt offering with it, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden rats, one for each of the 5 Philistine cities. Do not harden your hearts the way Pharaoh hardened his heart. You know what happened to Egypt. Philistine priests invoking the Exodus as a warning. That is how thoroughly the reputation of the God of Israel had traveled. They put the ark on a new cart, hitched to 2 milk cows that had never been yoked before. Cows that had nursing calves back in the barn, every animal instinct pulling them home. No driver, no guide. They let the cows go and watched. The cows turned onto the road to Beth Shemesh and walked straight there, lowing as they went, not turning to the right or the left. The people of Beth Shemesh were harvesting wheat in the valley when they looked up and saw the cart coming, and they rejoiced. The ark was home. The Levites lifted it down and placed it on a large stone in the field of a man named Joshua. They offered the cows as burnt offerings and split the wood of the cart for the fire. And then some of the men of Beth Shemesh made the last mistake of their lives. They looked inside. Josephus, writing in his Antiquities of the Jews, records what happened next. 70 men died on that field, not soldiers, not enemies of Israel. Men of Beth Shemesh, Israelites on Israelite soil, rejoicing at the return of the ark, struck dead because they looked inside the chest that housed the presence of God. The survivors sent messengers to the neighboring town of Kiriath Jearim with a message that still carries weight 3,000 years later. Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? Not who is holy enough, not what ritual do we perform, just the raw, shaking, unanswerable question of people who have just watched 70 of their neighbors die for the wrong kind of curiosity. Who is able to stand before the Lord, this holy God? The ark went to Kiriath Jearim, to the house of a man named Abinadab, and it stayed there for 20 years. And that is where Uzzah grew up, in that house, beside that object, so familiar with its presence that on a road outside Jerusalem, when a cart lurched, his hand moved before his mind did. David wanted to bring the ark to Jerusalem. By this point, David has united Israel, taken the city of Jerusalem from the Jebusites, and established it as his capital. He is at the height of his early power. He is beloved. He is victorious. And the one thing missing from his city, the one thing that would make Jerusalem not just a political capital, but the spiritual center of a nation, is the Ark of God. So David gathered 30,000 chosen men of Israel. He built a new cart. He arranged musicians. He organized a procession. He went to Kiriath Jearim to retrieve the ark from the house of Abinadab, and the 2 sons of Abinadab, Uzzah and Ahio, walked beside the cart as it moved toward Jerusalem. There was celebration. There was music, lyres and harps and tambourines and castanets and cymbals. There was dancing. The text says David and all the house of Israel were celebrating before the Lord with all their might. And then the cart hit a rut. Now you are back at the beginning. Now you understand what Uzzah understood, which is nothing, really, except the weight of the object tilting and the automatic reach of a man trying to prevent what he thought would be a disaster. His hand on the side of the ark, and then Uzzah was dead. The Hebrew root of his name, Uzzah, means strength. The strong man reached out his strength to steady what did not need steadying. David was angry. The text says so directly. He was angry because of what God had done to Uzzah. He named the place Perez Uzzah, the breaking out against Uzzah, and that name survived in Israel for centuries. As though the nation needed a word for the kind of grief that comes mixed with fury when something holy kills someone you knew. But anger was only the first wave. What came behind it was something deeper. David was afraid of the Lord that day. He stood on that road outside Jerusalem, 30,000 men behind him, the celebration gone silent, a dead man on the threshing floor, and said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" He did not say it defiantly. He said it the way a man says something when the world has just proven itself larger than he thought it was, when the rules he thought he understood have turned out to be different than he believed. He left the ark there, at the house of a man named Obed-Edom the Gittite. A Gittite, from Gath, the same Gath where the tumors had broken out when the ark passed through. Obed-Edom was not an Israelite by birth. He was a foreigner living among the people of God. And David, the king, the warrior, the man after God's own heart, walked away and left the most dangerous object in the world at the house of a foreigner, because he did not know what else to do with it. 3 months passed, and in those 3 months Obed-Edom the Gittite was blessed. Everything in his house, everything in his fields, his family, his property, his household. The text says that the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. Stay with me, because this is the detail that changes everything. Obed-Edom did not touch the ark. He did not approach it inappropriately. He did not perform any ceremony we have a record of. He simply said yes when the king asked if the most terrifying object in the history of Israel could stay in his house. And for 3 months, the manifest presence of God rested under his roof, and Obed-Edom was changed by proximity. David heard about it, and David went back for the ark. This time David did not build a new cart. First Chronicles records what changed between the first attempt and the second. David called the Levites, specifically the Kohathites, the family God had designated 400 years earlier in the wilderness. He said to them plainly, "You are the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites. Consecrate yourselves, you and your brothers, so that you may bring up the ark of the Lord, the God of Israel, to the place that I have prepared for it, because you did not carry it the first time the Lord our God broke out against us, because we did not seek him according to the rule." We did not seek him according to the rule. That is the confession of a king who has learned the difference between enthusiasm and obedience. David wanted the right thing. His heart was in the right place. He had 30,000 men and music and celebration. He had all the emotional sincerity a man could possess, and it was not enough. Because the ark was not a symbol to be moved with good intentions. It was the throne of the living God, and the living God had given instructions about how it was to be handled, and those instructions were not optional. The second procession looked different from the first. The Kohathites carried the ark on poles on their shoulders, the way God had said, and every 6 steps they stopped. David sacrificed an ox and a fattened animal every 6 steps. Not as a magic ritual, not as a performance, but as an acknowledgement that something was happening on that road that human beings were not large enough to contain without stopping to mark it. David danced. Not the restrained, dignified movement of a king who is aware of his reputation. The text says he danced before the Lord with all his might, wearing a linen ephod, a simple priest's garment rather than royal robes. His wife Michal, watching from a window, despised him in her heart for it. She thought it was beneath him. David's response, when she confronted him later, is one of the most clarifying statements in all of Scripture. It was before the Lord, who chose me above your father and above all his house, to appoint me as prince over Israel, the people of the Lord, and I will celebrate before the Lord. I will be even more undignified than this. I will be even more undignified than this. The ark entered Jerusalem. The people shouted, trumpets sounded, and the ark was set in the tent David had prepared for it. Then David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord, and he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts, and he distributed food to every person in the entire assembly of Israel, men and women alike, a loaf of bread, a portion of meat, and a cake of raisins. The presence of God had come home to its city, and a king who had once been a shepherd boy danced in a linen robe in the streets, because no other response made sense. Years later, Solomon built the temple, the permanent dwelling, cedar and gold and carved cherubim covering the walls from floor to ceiling. When the temple was finished and the ark was brought in and set beneath the wings of the great cherubim in the inner sanctuary, the most holy place, something happened that the priests were not prepared for. The kabod descended. A cloud filled the temple of the Lord, so thick, so total, so present that the priests could not stand to minister. They could not do their jobs. The manifest weight of God's presence was so concentrated in that space that the men whose entire purpose was to serve in that space were physically unable to remain standing. And Solomon stood before the assembly of Israel and said, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness. I have indeed built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell in forever." The throne had a home, the cupboard had an address. And now, finally, we get to the man we have been waiting for. Obed-Edom the Gittite. A foreigner, a man from Gath, the Philistine city where tumors had broken out when the ark passed through. A man whose name appears in the middle of one of the most famous stories in the Hebrew Bible, almost as a footnote. David left the ark at his house 3 months. Then David came back for it. That is all most people know about Obed-Edom. But here is the part nobody tells you. 1 Chronicles chapter 15 records that when David organized the second procession, the one with the Levites on poles, the one with the sacrifices every 6 steps, Obed-Edom was listed among the musicians appointed to play before the ark. He did not just house it, he followed it. He became part of the permanent musical assembly that served before the presence of God in the tent David pitched for the ark in Jerusalem. And then 1 Chronicles chapter 26 records that the sons of Obed-Edom, his children, born during or after those 3 months when the ark rested in their father's house, were appointed as gatekeepers of the temple, permanent positions, inherited roles, generation after generation. The man who said yes when everyone else stepped back became the father of a priestly line. He never touched the ark. Let that sit for a moment. In a story full of people who touched it and died, Uzzah with his reflex, the men of Beth Shemesh with their curiosity, the man who is remembered, the man whose family is still serving in the temple when Solomon dedicates it, is a Gittite foreigner who simply made room in his house for the presence of God. And God did not forget. 3 takeaways, and then one more thing after that. First, holiness is not cruelty. Every death in this story, Uzzah, Hophni, Phinehas, the men of Beth Shemesh, feels shocking to us because we have spent so long imagining a God who is primarily interested in being approachable. But fire burns not because fire is mean, but because fire is fire. The ark was not dangerous because God was angry. It was dangerous because God is real. The same presence that could not be touched without consequence is the presence that descended in a cloud and filled a temple so completely that trained priests could not stand up. You do not want a God who is safe. You want a God who is actually there. Second, the rules were not the enemy. David's first attempt failed not because his heart was wrong, but because his method was wrong. He used a new cart. The same method the Philistines had used, the method of people who were guessing. God had given specific instructions about how the ark was to be moved, and those instructions existed because the ark was not a religious object to be handled with general reverence. It was the throne of a specific God who had said specific things about how he was to be approached. Structure is not the opposite of grace. Sometimes structure is how grace survives the journey. Third, and this is the one that should stay with you, Obed-Edom did not do anything extraordinary. He did not perform a ritual. He did not achieve a level of holiness that others could not reach. He opened his door. He made space. He said yes to proximity when proximity looked terrifying. And for 3 months the weight of God's glory rested in his house. And when it left, Obed-Edom went with it. You do not have to be a Kohathite to be changed by what is holy. You do not have to be a priest or a king or a prophet. Sometimes you just have to be the person who says yes when everyone else is walking away. And one final thing, because this story does not end in Jerusalem. The ark disappears from the biblical record before Babylon burns the temple in 586 BC. Eusebius and later writers note that by the time Nebuchadnezzar's army arrived, the ark was gone, not captured, not destroyed, simply absent from every inventory of what was taken. Jeremiah, writing just before the fall, says something strange. The day is coming when people will no longer talk about the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. It will not come to mind. It will not be remembered. It will not be missed. That sounds like an ending. But the last time the Ark appears in all of Scripture is not in Jerusalem, and not in Babylon, and not in any earthly archive. It is in the book of Revelation, chapter 11. The seventh angel sounds his trumpet, and the temple of God in heaven is opened. And in that temple, visible for the first time since it vanished from the earth, is the Ark of his covenant, and around it, lightning and thunder, and an earthquake and heavy hail. It was never lost. It was never destroyed. It was never buried in a warehouse somewhere waiting to be found. It was moved somewhere safer than earth could hold. And the presence that once descended in a cloud, so thick that priests could not stand, the kabod, the weight, the glory is still there, still occupying its throne.